Hi crafters, this is Crafty Sabby, and I've been asked by a couple of my lovely subscribers to share how I created these book covers for these vintage journals that I made. So I thought I would just quickly go over what I do. It's really not that difficult. So I shared these on a previous video if you want to have a look as I flip through those. So they're not very big. I'll just move them aside and we can work on some together, or one together anyways. They are 8 3/4 by 5.5. So they're not very big at all. They fit really nice in your hand or in your purse. And so simply, all I do is I take a file folder, and I have these super old ones that someone gave me. They're legal size. It doesn't really matter. Any file folder will do. These are the ones I had. And there you can see I cut out my cover right from the middle of it. So I measured out 8 3/4 here by 5.5, and what I did a little trick here, but I'm going to give you this the score marks too. Is I used the actual binding from the file folder as where I would put my own binding on this book. But if you can't do that and you're going to cut out a piece right from the file folder, then you would cut this at 8 3/4 by 5.5, and you can place it in your scoreboard and score your own. So your first score mark would be at 4. So you would score here at 4, 4 1/4. I made, you don't probably have to put these two middle ones in. I just do because later on when I sew in my signatures, I kind of have a guideline, and that's what I would use. So again, that's 4, 4 1/4, 4.5. There's one down here. I've got tape at the back, so it's not going to go. 4.5 and 4 3/4. So I'll also write those down at the bottom so you don't have to worry too much. So that's how I get my spine for my book. The next thing I do is, and you don't have to do this, is I like to round my corners. I like these ones in particular have rounded corners. I don't always, but so that would be the next thing I would do, is just take a corner rounder and round your corners. And then what I did on this one, and I just tried to prepare ahead of time, is I placed some double-sided tape on the other side, and this is where I'm going to stick my image. I do use Mod Podge on this, but I also like to reinforce my image on the front with some tape behind it, just so that I know that it's stuck to that file folder really, really well. So, so that's what you could go ahead and do on that side. And then after that, I find an image that I like. So in my case, because I like everything vintage, I used out of an old book that was given to me. I found a certain image that I liked, and I also found some book paper. And from there, if it's not already vintage enough for you, you can coffee dye or stain or do whatever you like. So this time I found some kittens out of that book, and I made it even more old and vintage by using some distress stain and good old coffee, and mine is in a little bottle here. And so I did the front cover just to save time. Whoops, and we'll put that on together. But I just wanted to share a little trick with you, and most of you probably already know this, but I chose to use walnut stain this time. These ones are tea dyed, so they get a little bit more of an orange effect. But if you use your distress ink, and I left a little corner here, so we'll do it together. If you put your distress ink on your paper, you know, fairly heavily, and also still a little wet, and then you spray it with the coffee, you can see how the distress ink reacts when it's wet. It gets this really cool look to it. To me, that looks super vintage. So I tend to love that look. So if you want, you can give it a little rub here. And then I just take my heat gun, and sorry for the noise, hopefully this will go quick. I just heat it up, and sometimes I get some smoke, and that means the paper is probably burning a little bit, but I also like that effect. So we're just gonna go ahead and heat this up so we can use it really quick. There we go. Smell that paper. I know you can't, but I can. It smells really good. So there we go. So that's that. And so that's how I get that sort of old world look there. So the distress ink reactivates with the water or the coffee. So that's how I got that. So I'll move this aside. Actually, we're going to need that again. So then I get my book cover back out here. And we're going to remove all of the tape that we put on the back. You know, I suppose you could just use the Mod Podge here, but I like to be sure. So there's a lot more tape on there than I thought. Okay, one more. And that's it. So I'll bring that cover back in, and I'm gonna flip it over. I've already cut the corners. I mitered them so that I can fold them over onto the back here. And I'll just set that kind of where I want it. Make sure, just like that. Give it a good press. And now here's where the mess begins. I'll take my Mod Podge. And we'll just pour that right on there. I like to put it on kind of heavily so that I know it'll all stick. Just like kindergarten. So just like that. And then I will fold in my my paper here. It doesn't have to be neat. It just has to be stuck down. There. When the paper is thin, it's easy to kind of miter those corners. Sorry, that wasn't even on camera. But I just really just pushed it in. Nothing really to it there. put some Mod Podge on top. So again, I just kind of fold it in and fold it up. Get this all stuck down. One more side. Just tuck that in. There we go. And make sure those are down. So, like, it's a hot mess right now, but you know. So then what I've already done is I've cut a piece of book paper, and I did the same thing to it. And I cut it that it would just fit in there. What is that? About 8 1/4 by just a little more than 5 1/4. And I will just set that right inside there. And when I cut this, I already knew that my front cover would sort of, you know, overlap onto the inside. So I knew that whatever I put in there would fit. I didn't want it hang. What I mean is I didn't want this page hanging off of the edge, so you have to trim and whatever. So I like to fold the front cover onto the inside to avoid any of that. And then I just put some more of this, glue it down. And the Mod Podge has a tendency to kind of move some of that stain around, but that's okay too, because once it's dry, it looks really, really nice. So anyhow, I'm not going to bore you with the gluing. So that is basically it. So I'd probably give that, you know, I'd fiddle around with it a little more and get it all pressed down and make sure that it's all stuck down. And then once the inside was dry, I would come back to the front here. Doesn't that look cute? I would come back to the front and Mod Podge this so that I get that shine that I'm after. And that is basically it. So let's just say, for instance, this one. So that's what I did. I Mod Podged the inside, and then I did the outside to give it that shine. And then that is basically it. This happens to have wood words on it, but you could put anything up there. You could put metal corners on it. The only other thing I did was I punched a hole right here. I put a grommet in there, and that's for just because, like this one, there's a little owl on that one, but I put a tie on it. This one's not finished yet, but same thing, there's a grommet under there, and I will fix up the tie for that one. And so you can see here as well. You don't have to do that. You could just use a piece of seam binding, whatever you like. So I hope that helps. And that's it. So go ahead, give it a try. It's a great size, a lot of fun to make. And that's it. We will talk to you guys soon. I hope you're all doing well. Thank you for the inquiry, and we will see you all soon. Bye.